An artist I've been dying to work with asked me if I'd mix their upcoming single. This was it, the gig that takes my career to the next level. I got to work to make everything absolutely perfect. I sent the mix off and awaited the response from the artist affirming the brilliance of the mix I had done. A few minutes later, I received a reply from the artist. I opened up the message with excitement, ready for all the praise coming my way. But then something I couldn't have imagined happened while I read the message. The artist was not excited about the mix. They thanked me for the work that I had done and then said the dreaded sentence that haunts every mixer's nightmares. They wanted to go in another direction and have someone else mix the single. I, of course, did what any rational human would do in this situation. I threw a rage fit, told the artist they were stupid, they didn't know what they were saying. I knew this mix was excellent, and they weren't inclined to know any better. I was right, and they were wrong. Plain and simple. So as you can imagine, that didn't go too well. And to this day, I regret this mistake and cringe thinking about it. After I took a few weeks to cool off, I went back to listen to the mix. Something happened when I listened to that mix again. I got a pit in my stomach as I came to the realization the artist was right. My mix was boring. It was like my 10th grade history teacher had done the mix. And at that moment, I vowed to never let my ego or temper get the best of me. But I needed to find a way to make my mixes exciting so that the artists and their fans would want to listen to the song over and over again. So I did something that just about all audio engineers, producers, and mixers hate more than vampires. I went outside into the daylight for a walk. Because having an intense stare down with Logic wasn't going to fix this problem. While I was on this walk, I tried to think about how to make my mixes more exciting without throwing money at the problem. Because buying new gear or plugins wasn't going to have the artists and their fans loving the mix and playing it on repeat. Excitement in a mix comes from making the listener experience an emotion. I was constantly trying to mimic what my favorite mixers did, but it wasn't having the same effect on my mixes. So I tried thinking about genres of music that add excitement through its compositions. And just like in Umbrella Academy in season 3, when number 5 figures out that by standing on the second floor of Hotel Obsidian and changing his perspective, the key to the sigil had been on the lobby floor the entire time. Ah shit, I should have said spoiler warning. Here. So the answer was right in front of me. I was always listening to rock, metal, and pop music, mimicking what was happening to have sonically perfect mixes. But that doesn't matter to an artist or their fans. How a song makes them feel does. I started to think about music outside of rock, metal, and pop that would make me feel things. And game and film scores were perfect examples of creating emotions through the movement of the music. Think about how you felt during the haunted house scene in It, or the chase scene in Captain America Civil War. With this in mind, I started to think about stealing some of these feelings and incorporating them into my mixing so that I can make more emotionally captivating mixes. The great part about these techniques is you can do these tricks right now and rescue your mixes from being played in retirement homes around the world. The first film score that drove me down this path of inspiration was scored by the man himself behind movies like The Dark Knight and Interstellar. Hans Zimmer's work on the Pirates of the Caribbean to this day will randomly ring in my head with that hook that gets me each time. You know, this one. The staccato feel from the performance helps the notes add to the driving movement and intensity of the scene. I wondered to myself, how could I replicate this in my own mixes? And kind of like how Elizabeth smacks Jack Sparrow in the face, I wanted my drum transients to slap the listener whenever a drum fill or drum roll happens, like a staccato transient crescendo. And for whatever reason, when I think staccato, I think transient shapers, clippers, and gates. I ended up with a parallel drum bus where I'd use a shelf to take out some of the low frequencies, followed by a multi-band transient shaper like AudioSalt's multi-transient that would allow me to get more poke out of the fundamentals and the stick attack, then a clipper just to make sure I'd get some more heft. And whenever a drum fill or roll happens, automate the fader and turn on the bus. One of my fondest memories was in my early teens, going to a friend's house and having LAN parties. Yes, I've aged myself, leave me alone. And Halo's theme song is one of the most iconic game scores of all time. There's a part that always gets me hyped every time I hear it, which is this part. When that thunderous rhythm section hits, it's incredible. And I wanted that feeling in my mixes. I spent weeks trying to figure out how to get the same type of excitement. What I eventually came up with was a fun way to use saturation and parallel processing to get more excitement in your choruses, bridges, and even breakdowns. Make a parallel bus and add an instance of Saturn or DF Clarify, drive the harmonics in the mids, and send your drum rooms to this parallel bus. The saturation in the mids will give an almost pad ensemble sound, which will create a nice lush layer of thunderous excitement. Undoubtedly, another one of the best video game scores of all time is from a studio that made acclaimed games like The Elder Scrolls Skyrim and Dishonored. But when Bethesda brought on Mick Gordon to compose the scores for the Doom games, I don't think anyone was expecting some of the most exciting compositions in video game history. One staple of Mick's work is the pummeling kick and bass relationship that works with the aggressive hooks all over the scores he composes. But this one in particular inspired me one day to figure out how I could get a thuddier bass kick relationship. Okay, so thuddier wasn't a word, now it is, you're welcome. I wanted to create a way to get a thuddier punchy kick and bass that would be the audio equivalent of when the Hulk smashed Loki around like in the Avengers.
Puny God.
To do this, I sent a kick and bass to a mono parallel bus, filter out a hair of low end and enough top end that the parallel bus is getting the meat of the mids from the kick and the bass. Add some tube saturation from a plugin like Blackbox Design's HG2 to thicken up the bus, followed by a little Neve or Pultec low end lift, then throw in a compressor like a rouser. And lastly, just in case you aren't getting enough thuddiness, throw a hair of transient shaping in the mids with AudioSote's multi-transient. Focusing the kick and bass mid thud in the center channel helps push the groove forward in sections that need a ridiculous amount of weight. Caution though in this one, a little will go a long way. You want to dial it in where you can feel it more than you hear it. And to really take your mixes to the next level, you'll want to watch the video right here for some sneaky tricks mixers use to hook listeners.